world is changing fast. New technologies are impacting how we think about products, services, and the way we live our lives. Nowhere is this trend more present than in financial services, where new business models and customer expectations are changing our conceptions about banking, finance, and the very nature of money. Welcome to Rebank, a visionary podcast about banking, fintech, and the future. The future of banking is here. Hello and welcome to Rebank. I'm your host, Will Beeson. In today's episode, we catch up with Marieke Flament, Chief Marketing Officer of Circle, one of the most noteworthy crypto companies in the world. Circle was the first company to receive a BIT license from the state of New York and the first virtual currency business to receive an e-money license from the British government. Circle has raised over $135 million since 2013, including a $50 million round led by Goldman Sachs. Earlier this year, Circle acquired crypto exchange Poloniex for $400 million, with leaked documents suggesting an aspiration to make Poloniex America's first regulated crypto exchange. As always, connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or on our website at bankingthefuture.com. If you like today's show, please subscribe on iTunes or your podcast platform of choice and leave us a review. Thank you very much for joining us today. Please welcome Marieke Flament. Marieke Flament, welcome to Rebank.
Thank you.
You're the Managing Director for Europe and the Global Chief Marketing Officer of Circle, right?
Yeah, correct.
Tell us a bit about Circle.
Yeah, so Circle is a crypto finance company, and we believe in the tokenization of everything. So we believe that every asset, every contract, every form of art, as you know it today, is going to be tokenized on blockchain. And so what we do is that we build products to enable that vision to become true. We do have several products that go from very consumer to then very institutional products. Our consumer products are Circle Pay. You can send, receive money very easily, like an email or an SMS. Our second consumer product is called Circle Invest, and the goal of that is to actually make crypto mainstream and help people who actually don't really know about crypto but have heard about it and want to invest in it start putting their first feet under it. At the opposite end of the spectrum, you have Circle Trade, which is one of the largest crypto trading desks in the world and mainly serving large financial institutions, family funds, hedge funds, exchanges to liquidate between crypto and fiat currency. And in the middle, you have Poloniex, which is an exchange that we recently acquired, which is basically a crypto exchange.
Wow. All right. Lots to dig into. This is great. So I'm interested, I guess, maybe just to start to pick up on what you said early on about how Circle's premise is that everything eventually will kind of be tokenized, will be tradable via things like blockchain. Can you expand on that a little bit? Because basically the initial, arrival of all things crypto was kind of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, and they had this kind of currency word associated with them, which may or may not be appropriate. And then there have been some extensions of that same concept of things like jewelry, art, as you mentioned. How far is it likely to go? How quickly? Where do you see the main relevance of this technology, this ecosystem?
Yeah, sure.
In the next few years?
What we are seeing, you're right. Cryptocurrency started with Bitcoin, and then that actually has its own limitations, right? So then other projects started rising up, and one of the most famous one was Ethereum. And actually on Ethereum, what you can do is that you can code smart contracts, right? So you can basically code anything from like you own this flat to you own a car and to actually you voted for something. And that actually was the burst when smart contracts started happening, and then what we call today security tokens and the rise with that of ICO, initial coin offering. So there is definitely been like a layer of different projects that have evolved, and it keeps evolving. Every week there is a new project coming out there. Every week there's new innovations. There is like thousands of people that are trying to figure out what does this mean, this new distributed, decentralized technology, and what can actually happen on it. So, in short, there is definitely a lot of different projects, a lot of different coins, a lot of different things that can be done on it. But the fact is that if you push forward, and it might sound a bit like la la land if you look at today where we are and where we think this is going, but in theory the reality is that we can really put on the blockchain a lot of the things that we do today. Let's take a concrete example. I buy a flat, that's a contract that actually is between me, a landlord, and actually it's registered to the state. That could be actually put on a blockchain, and you'd have less intermediaries, and actually it would probably go faster and be cheaper and so on and so forth. Is it something we can really do like today? No, but that technology enables us to do that. Push it even further, like you own some luxury goods, you could actually also register them on a blockchain, and there's been projects like that, registering diamonds, being able to track them from when they're sourced to actually where they are, in which ring they become, and where they go. So all of that is really possible, and we're starting to see more and more projects go in that direction. What's currently missing is actually, what does it mean for individuals, right? And what we believe in is that actually changes fundamentally the way you handle your assets, and also the future of banking, honestly, because it's not necessarily that the future bank might just be like the bank as we know it, but digital, but the future bank might be completely different because of that.
So, all right, so the Circle's premise is that long-term, everything is tokenized. It seems like at the moment, your focus is around quote-unquote traditional crypto coins, i.e. the kind of currency equivalents, the Bitcoins, the Ethereums, the Ripples, presumably some of the other...
Yeah, we do trade, it depends on which product. But for example, in Ethereum, you have the top 7 most traded cryptocurrencies. And we look carefully at, okay, are those currencies, assets, like what are they actually? On Poloniex, you have hundreds of different coins that actually are traded there. And same in Circle Trade, you can actually trade like 15, 20 different coins. Every project is quite different, right? So what we've developed actually a token framework to help us also go through what are those projects, who is behind that, what is it actually trying to achieve, and trying to be as agnostic as we can to actually find the projects that are adding value. So yes, you can say that as of today, the part we really play is more on the trading of those tokens and the exchange that is happening with them and investing in them. So that's the part we're focusing on. But in the short term, what we're looking at is how could we actually also help create some of those. So imagine that you have a business and you could come on one of our platform and one of our product and create your own token for that business and then actually start exchanging that.
Okay, so it sounds like one of the 4 areas of your business at the moment is this OTC trading piece. So basically working with, it sounds like mostly institutional investors, people looking to move large amounts of crypto to fiat, or I guess fiat to crypto. In your experience, what's the institutional interest? We've seen all sorts of headlines recently, ICE launching the backed proposition, and a number of other, I think Coinbase recently launched a kind of an institutional custody piece, which some people are kind of referring to as the missing link for more significant institutional involvement in crypto. In your experience, what's the institutional appetite at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what we're saying is that the institutional appetite is definitely growing, and it goes from like large financial institutions, but also to like family funds and hedge funds that have been usually traditionally focused on like more classical assets, and who are starting actually to look at that as like a new form of assets and a new class of assets. On your second point, actually on custody, you're right. One of the main challenge of the entire industry is actually how do you keep those assets safe, right? And there are different ways of doing that. You can do cold storage, you can actually do hot storage, but like figuring that out for those institutions to be very comfortable is super important. Another part that is very important is actually regulation. For large financial institutions to start being in that field, you also need for those institutions to feel that actually they know what they're trading, and actually there is a framework behind for them to understand what's going on. And you also need, for example, for people like us to be compliant, which means that every new institution that wants to be onboarded on Circle Trade, we have to check the KYC, AML, and so on and so forth, right? To really check where his funds come from, what's the source of funds, and basically do our DD on consumers. So all of that, I think, is important to have more and more traditional financial institutions coming in. But we've definitely seen that happen, and we see that happen more and more. Mm-hmm.
It sounds like that kind of due diligence, KYC, AML piece is one of Circle's strong suits compared to some other less reputable crypto companies, and indeed that, if anything, you are on good terms with national regulators. I mean, what has your experience been like in that space? Do you have dialogues, interactions with, I don't know, likes of the SEC and, I don't know, FCA in the UK?
Yeah, we are very actively engaged because we also believe that the technology we touch are complicated, right? Even like when you're in the space, things move very, very quickly. And there is like lots of people trying to figure out all those new mental models. But it's also our role to actually educate and work with regulators to figure out what should be the right regulatory framework. What we believe in is actually regulation is super important. Regulation is here to protect consumers. So we need to have regulation around that. So that's why also we are engaging in all those conversations. There is also working groups, for example, GDF, which has been started here in the UK, Global Digital Finance, which are working collaboratively, trying to figure out what is the taxonomy in crypto, what should actually be happening, how should this thing be looked at and regulated, and help educate, actually coming out as a body industry to actually help regulators. It's critical. I think it's a duty of the industry, especially in something that is so innovative, to work hand in hand with regulators.
I'm curious, what is the day-to-day like for you as the MD of Europe? What does that mean?
Well, it means traveling a lot across Europe. I was actually in Dublin yesterday and the day before. It actually also means, so the role I have there in Europe right now, we are 60 people for Circle. So there is 25 people in London, 30 people who are in Ireland, and then we have a small office in France and a small office in Italy, from which we oversee Switzerland and Germany. Those offices actually go to market. So basically what we look at is what can we do in terms of go to market for the products of Circle and getting those in the region. It actually involves a lot of regulation and lobbying and working with governments part, because in Europe, the regulation is actually not framed yet for crypto. The FCA has a certain view on how crypto should be looked at, but then if you look at France and if you look at the rest, there is no harmonization yet. And so that's an opportunity to actually help Europe shape that. So looking a lot at that. And in Ireland, our offices are more operation-centric, but to support actually all those go-to-market activities that we have.
What percentage of the staff globally, I guess, is technologists versus business or operations or compliance?
Yeah, it's a large part. So it's over 70%, I would say, that is actually technology. So engineers from like back-end, front-end engineers, I would put in this function because that's also the way we handle it. Every risk operation that we look at, it's actually core to Circle, right? We are first and foremost actually a technology engineering company. And then on that, then you add actually when you can do marketing and things like that. But the strongest layer of what we have are actually our engineers.
One of the other topics I wanted to pick up with you is the, I suppose the subject of diversity in the crypto space. Maybe specifically women in crypto. There seems to be underrepresentation, to put it mildly, of women in crypto. Be interested in your view there.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think it's also because crypto in itself is still very, very technological, and making that mainstream, and actually I take that as a mission, right? Making that mainstream, which means that everybody can understand what it is and actually make it part of their today's life. It's not today. It doesn't happen, right? Which actually means it's quite daunting for women to get in that space. And even once you're in, it's actually still daunting because it's very, very technical, very geeky. I'm a computer science engineer by background, but it's still intimidating when you see all those different things that are going on. So it's difficult to attract women in the space. It's difficult to actually retain women in space. What we've done at Circle, we were the first fintech to sign the Women in Finance Charter, which has been done by the UK government, which I think is an amazing thing. It's super simple. It actually helps companies commit to having a certain number of women in the company, but also on the board and so on and so forth. And doing things like that is forcing companies like ourselves, for example, to keep ourselves in check. Because otherwise, things could become very cliquey very quickly. And then we're going to reproduce what we saw in banking and actually what we saw in tech. And that's also one of the issues, that if you're in fintech and you add a layer of blockchain on that, good luck for being diverse, right? But ultimately, the products we're trying to build are for everyone. And so if you don't have women that are actually also participating in that conversation, and if you don't have diverse background and people from actually different culture and different religion, you're not going to build product for everybody. So for example, our head of Circle Invest is an amazing woman. She's based in New York. That product is meant to actually become mainstream for everybody. It's amazing to have someone like that at the head of that. So it's super important. But yeah, it's an everyday challenge, I would say.
It sounds like there are three kind of core components of the business. Basically, one is the payments piece, one is the kind of consumer crypto investments piece, and one is the institutional investments piece. Which of those three components do you view as being most likely to drive Circle's growth going forward?
Great question. And I think it's actually a good way to put it. I think it's probably going to be the part that is consumer crypto. And that will take time, because today what we're seeing is that in crypto, actually, a lot of investors, whether they are like day traders or whales, as we call them, or whether they're institutions, it's actually still, it's quite niche, right? It's super small. The real growth and in that entire market will come from when we are able to actually have mainstream consumer, see real applications in day-to-day life, which really means for them, they actually don't need to know what blockchain is or how it works, right? I'm sending you an email. I don't know what SMTP is. It works. So I think when we'll get there, then we'll have a real mainstream moment. So over time, and that's definitely what we're going for, is like those real mainstream consumer applications, because growth in particular in terms of numbers will come from there.
So does that mean more like 2017 era like crypto speculation, or does it mean, you mentioned SMTP before, like everyone just using email because it's the way people communicate, and there happens to be, in the case of crypto, like a utility token behind that that's kind of driving?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter. I think the part where it's just like speculation is actually not good. It's not helpful, right? A lot of those projects have been fraudulent and have not helped. A bit like the internet bubble, where you have a lot of like, you can buy a dog online and everybody's going on that, and actually 2 years later, well, oops, you can't buy a dog online. But I think it's actually part of the innovation curve that we're seeing. But over time, that will completely change.
Yeah. And I guess that kind of means that it will be less consumers going to exchanges and buying currencies, i.e. tokens, the way they might buy equities today, and more some sort of like automated, almost back-end component that's sourcing the tokens that they need to engage with the services that they're looking to do.
Yeah, exactly. Or like if you want to interact with actually this pizza shop that you really like, then that will be done based on blockchain technology, but you don't necessarily see that. If you want to send actually a gift to a friend who's really far away, and you actually want to send him a piece of this art stuff that he really likes, you can actually do that over the blockchain. And if you want to hold all your assets in one place, you can do that. So, but it won't mean that you know what blockchain is. You just can send seamlessly all those assets the same way we send an email.
So would you think that there's a possibility that Circle and similar companies, which are now kind of vying for direct consumer access, is it possible that longer term those companies kind of become back-end layers, kind
the
of
infrastructure,
right? Supporting, I don't know, like to your example of sending art, like, I don't know, maybe it's you're doing it via, like, Facebook is the front end, but then it's Circle supporting the transaction in the background or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because one thing we're seeing is that definitely the infrastructure is kind of missing, right? And one project I haven't talked about, but we created a foundation called Center, which actually helps create the framework for creating stable coins. And that's actually something is fundamental to the infrastructure of the entire crypto ecosystem. So that is us creating the infrastructure. It's like as if we were creating HTTP so that the internet can exist, and so that then on the internet you can have Google and Amazon and so on and so forth. Difficult to predict what it will be. I think today what we're seeing is that probably we'll get to a place where there is all those decentralized applications. So there'll be cool applications that then can maybe participate in an ecosystem that Circle has built, maybe more the wallets for it, or more the places where it can be exchanged. And maybe we'll have built some of those applications.
So I have to ask this just because it's kind of interesting, kind of timely. Goldman Sachs is an investor in Circle, and I think one of their analysts put out a report just this week or last week talking about how basically his view is that Bitcoin is headed down from here, and it's in all likelihood not coming back. Be interested in your view.
I'd love to have a crystal ball to know what's going to happen. I think it's actually very difficult, and who knows? The opposite views could be that actually it's going to be the currency of the world. I don't know, and we should have this conversation in a year or 2 years to actually see. What I think will happen is that we'll have more and more of those tokens and those crypto assets that are emerging. Will we have one that thrive, or will we have actually thousands of those, because the small economies and the medium and large economies in which we'll participate will have their tokens? I think it's actually more the latter.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the, I can't remember what you called it, center. What was a not-for-profit or a foundation, correct. Right? Yeah. So in addition to center, is there any other work that you guys are doing, like B2B or more like infrastructure related?
So we're actually, as part of Center, Circle is launching the stablecoin USDC.
That's like a fiat-linked coin?
Yeah,
is that
that's pretty huge. But basically what it is, it's actually, instead of having US dollar, you have a crypto USD, and it's backed 1-to-1. So every time there is a USDC that is in the ecosystem, there is a US dollar in a bank account segregated. It's audited so that there is also traceability for that. But what that means for the crypto ecosystem is back to Bitcoin, right? Today, if I want to buy a coffee with Bitcoin, I can't, because maybe today it's $2 and then tomorrow actually I paid my coffee $5. So it's two.
Like the guy that bought the pizza for like 17 Bitcoin.
Yeah, and today would be like, but it's too volatile, right? So that doesn't work. So that ecosystem needs stability, and that stability needs to actually be done in a way that is transparent and that is auditable and so on and so forth. So that's the project that we're working on at the moment.
What is so the crypto space is like kind of in an interesting spot, maybe even a bit more earlier this year than now even. But you have all these people that through serendipity ended up massively wealthy, at least on paper. And I don't know, like if you think about Silicon Valley, there's like it works because there are all these like first generation, like Intel generation, like successful founders who then reinvest in the local ecosystem, seed companies, fund them, they make money, they exit, repeat. And it kind of feels like the same thing has happened in the crypto space. I guess at the same time, that suggests that there are some people with outsized influence as a result of early involvement in Bitcoin. I don't know. I mean, what's your feeling? Does it feel like it's sustainable? Does it feel like the right things are happening? Like influence is in the right place in the crypto ecosystem, or
I think it's actually reshaken a lot of the traditional world, right? And you're right, because if we looked, I think year to date it's something like $15 billion that have been raised by ICOs. That's pretty humongous amount of money. And yes, that's being reinvested in like creating new projects and trying new things out there. There's a lot of new people, as to say, that have seen that and have gotten in that. And yes, they'll be the first founders of all those different crypto future companies that exist out there. It's interesting to see that, at the geographical level, Asia definitely is like at the forefront of that. And I think when you look at Europe, I think we're a bit in between like the US, which has a lot happening, and then in Asia, where there's definitely a humongous amount of crypto projects that are going on there. So I think potentially it can also completely change the world arrangement, right? And like economies and rebalance actually what we've been seeing over the last 20, 30, 40 years.
I guess from the perspective of both incumbent financial services firms and regulators, in your view, what's the right balance between regulation and innovation? How do we kind of promote innovation while at the same time ensuring, to use your words before, a consumer protection, which is at the end of the day fundamental in all this?
Yeah, I think the first fundamental thing is actually to not regulate the technology, but to regulate the services that are on top of it. And that's a fundamental distinction that we've actually been pushing for, which in that instance, for example, would mean it's not about regulating Ethereum, but it's actually about regulating the different applications that can exist on Ethereum. And it's about regulating the different services that, for example, like us, like if you do an exchange or if you actually have an app where people can send, receive, that it's about regulating those things. And actually, I think we don't necessarily need to reinvent regulation. We do have regulation and consumer protection that is in place. It's more about finding what fits into what category, and then making sure that those can actually be fixed into those categories.
Yeah. Before we go, can you tell people where they can find out more about Circle and connect with you, follow you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find more about us on circle.com, where you'll find actually all our different suite of products. We're also on LinkedIn, we're also on Twitter, and yeah, that's where you can find us.
Excellent. Marieke Flament, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks
for tuning into Rebank. If you like today's show, reach out. Follow us on Twitter at Rebank Podcast and join the conversation. For more on banking, fintech, and the future, check out our regular content at www.bankingthefuture.com.